Hey, this is Chris from Rekkid Talk, and so it's time for another episode, the third episode of the Venn Diagrams. And so I promise this week's episode will not involve Susie and the Banshees. So what are the best three wings of the VC in terms of sort of your groups of people that are into a certain type of music? I think the answer is obvious. I'm not a member of the first one, but there's the metal VC. There's, of course, the punk VC. And then there are the jazz bows, jazz bums, whatever you want to call the jazz people. And so we're going to do a Venn diagram with something that's jazz only, metal only, punk only, and then the two-way and the three-way intersections. So let's start off with some old school jazz. And so the pianist, bandleader, composer, Duke Ellington, he'd been on the scene since the 1920s. He was born as far back as 1899. And so this is a 1967 album on Harmony, which I think was like a subprint of Columbia. It's called Ellington Fantasies. It's actually just a reissue of 1962's Midnight in Paris. I got it cheap at some point. And it's certainly not quite Take the A Train. All right, let's get into some old school metal. And so the super obvious choice for old school metal is going to be Black Sabbath. And here is their 1970 debut. And as some of you might have heard, they are playing their final show this year. But this is the first rumblings of Tony Iommi taking guitar away from just sort of the classic blues rock, what you were hearing from Clapton and those sorts of folks, something doomier, something more sinister. You've got a young and vital Ozzy Osbourne on vocals. There were some weird choices of covers on side 2. There was sort of that early hard rock song Evil Woman by the band Crow, but you gotta love the Black Sabbath and you gotta love N.I.B. All right, and then some punk. I could go obvious with some old school Ramones, some old school Sex Pistols, but we're going to do the Buzzcocks, Singles Going Steady. So this was a comp that was originally released in the United States in 1979, and it included the UK singles and their respective B-sides that have been released over the previous couple of years. So, of course, you've got Pete Shelley and Howard Devoto and the gang, the best album the Buzzcocks never made. Some reviewer referred to this as. So is it punk? Is it post-punk? Is it power pop? Whatever it is, it's great. Songs like Orgasm Addict will make you a Buzzcocks addict. And then Have You Ever Fallen in Love? All right, let's get into some of those two-way intersections. And so in the 1980s, I think it was pretty much inevitable that metal and punk were going to collide. Some of this collision happened to happen in Southern California, and in particular on the SST label. And I apologize to you regular viewers who've seen me show this before. So I present the grimy doom metal band St. Vitus on this grimy old cassette comp. And you've also got Black Flag and SWA and DC3 and Worm and Overkill. This is not the thrash Overkill. This is the LA Overkill. And so St. Vitus used to open for Black Flag a lot, and they were hated by Black Flag's crowd, but they just didn't really fit in. And they didn't fit in the punk world either, because the punks would have saw them as being too metal. And in the 80s metal world, they were neither fitting into the Sunset Strip with the Hairspray crowd or with the thrashers that thought Black Sabbath should be played faster rather than slower. But yet a couple of innovators like St. Vitus and up in the Pacific Northwest, the Melvins, who saw the value in playing those doomy riffs very, very slowly. And so I wasn't paying very much attention to either jazz or metal in the 1990s, so I came along to Sonny Chirac well after his passing. I got the recent Vinyl Me Please from a few years ago, back before I abandoned. I'm going to show you, I've got it on fancy red vinyl, if I can find it here. All this stuff arranged at my feet. So originally on the Island label, got it on red vinyl. There's Sonny Chirac, Ask the Ages. And so this could be called hard bop, it could be called free jazz, it could be called fusion. He's got players the quality of Pharoah Sanders and Elvin Jones on this record. This record made the top 20 of 1991's Paz and Jop list from the Village Voice. I think he influenced a lot of the prog metal guys, and this was the final album released in his lifetime before his death in 1994. And so more recently, we've had a band called the Mesthetics that has emerged. They came together in 2016 with sort of an experimental guitarist, Anthony Pirogue, being joined by the rhythm section of Joe Lally on bass and Brandon Canty on drums. They released their debut in 2018 on Discord Records, so we're going to have sort of the intersection of jazz and punk. And if those names Lally and Canty sound familiar, that's of course because they come from the legendary Fugazi. And so in 2024, those three guys collaborated with the saxophonist James Brandon Lewis to go on kind of full-on improvisational jazz. But you still got the punk rockers there. And so this was released on Impulse rather than Discord. And so you've noticed throughout the making of this video, I've been getting more and more obscure, and this is definitely going to continue for the three-way intersection, a record I'm claiming, a compact disc I'm claiming, is going to make those three hard-to-please camps of jazz bums, metalheads, and punk rockers happy. Hell, this one might even satisfy the prog nerds, too. In fact, it might satisfy the prog people more than anyone else. And so this is a Russian band, Deti Yeti, and so they're Moscow-based. You can see this album's called Progressive Punk, and so this album's called Progressive Punk. They're kind of progressive punk. This is a CD they released back in 2018. I traced it down on Discogs, the Addicted label, No Name 666. Bandcamp. This was sold out. So I did track it down. It is, as you might suspect by what I've been describing so far, it's really all over the place with the mix of genres, the mix of influences, long meandering songs with everything from synth to guitar to brass, glockenspiel, spoken word, beatbox, field recordings. So there's like prog, there's like jazz, there's like krautrock. It's pretty much everything. Now, honestly, you might find this to be a bit too unfocused with sort of this everything but the kitchen sink. And the CD sleeve's like a mini album sleeve, so that's like the inner sleeve. This one must have been meant for the non-Russian audience because everything's written in English. And then there's what the actual CD looks like. Deti Yeti. And I've been told that it is pronounced as Deti Yeti, progressive punk. So sometimes it sounds like Can, and sometimes it sounds like Mr. Bungle, and sometimes it sounds like the Osric Tentacles, and sometimes it sounds like Rainbow, and it's like the Borscht King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And so that's kind of your intersections of the jazz world, the metal world, and the punk rock world.